And joining us right now, ladies and gentlemen, from crossingbroad.com, as well as the Crossing Broadcast, which you guys can catch Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12 to 2. What do you guys? You guys just run forever? Kevin, how long you guys go?
Yeah, depending. If we have a good guest, we'll keep it going. If the show's not, if we're kind of ran out of steam, we'll cut it close. So, no hard outs for us,
But, yeah, exactly. Digital world's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Kevin Kinkead joins us from Crossing Broad and Crossing Broadcast as well. Kevin, let's start it off with the hottest team in town right now. And even though the Eagles just had an open practice, I know people want to talk about that. We'll get to that. Phillies are just absolutely on fire. At the time they let go of Joe Girardi, did you ever think that this type of run was going to be possible where they look like a playoff-bound team?
No, I did not believe that would be possible. We were waiting for the inevitable, you get your bump off the new manager and then you fall back to earth, and you kind of stumble to your inevitable, 2 games over 500, 2 games under 500 or whatever it feels like the Phillies have been for the last, X amount of years now. But it's exciting, man. I like this is it's funny because everybody's all into the Eagles and the training camp stats and can't get enough of the Jalen Hurts talk and whatever. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I'm like, this is actually like the best sports summer that Philadelphia has had in at least 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't got to tell you, I'm a Union guy, so I follow the soccer team all the time, and they're playing their best season ever. The Phillies are probably going to the playoffs for the first time. Now, I don't want to jinx it. Not going to find some wood here, but I mean, like the Phillies are probably going to the playoffs. The Union are a title contender. I mean, like it's amazing right now the scene, So I just think it's funny because I look at like the Cardinals winning like 7 in a row. The Phillies are like 10 of 11. Ironically, it's the Brewers that they're going to be battling with here. San Diego not looking so great after their big signings, but yeah, it's wide open, man. I mean, people should be excited about this team. I mean, I'm old enough to remember. It feels like it was forever ago, but when the Phillies were like ruling the town, man, and you got more calls on sports radio about the Phillies than the Eagles, but it's a better vibe when the Phillies are good and when they're playing well,
Yeah, well, let's just go back to that for a second and talk about those like 10, 11 years ago, whatever it was. I remember the only time really in my adult fandom that the Phillies ever threatened the Eagles in terms of being an Eagles or Phillies town, and that conversation, even having that conversation acknowledges that the Eagles were losing a little bit of ground. And I always likened it to, it's pretty much whatever it's pretty much the town is pretty much behind whatever team is pissing them off the least. Like that's kind of the order of which it goes. But I do remember the Eagles were kind of giving you this song and dance about like not wanting to go after number 1 targets and free agents, and it was still the Joe Banner era. And it was like they were ignoring fans. And I remember one time this picked up a little bit of steam. I just said, you know what, Phillies fans, wear your Phillies gear to an Eagles game. And I remember that like caught some people's attention, that it pissed them off a little bit. And it was like, that would have been the ultimate insult. It ended up not getting the legs I wanted it to, but no, that was like the only time it really threatened. But the Phillies seemed to be at least that good or that exciting again.
That was real. That was very real. Like, we're not making that up. I remember, I'd go back and forth from the sports talk radio stations to the different websites and kind of like just gauge what was working, what people were talking about, what we were doing when I was at Channel 3 at the time, how we would order our 2 minutes or our 2.5 minutes of sports that they would give us every night, but the Phillies were playing high, man. And they were resonating much more than the Eagles were at that time. It was interesting because they could do no wrong, and the Eagles were kind of dwindling in the like the end of the Andy era at that point. I think you were coming off the dream team year. Yeah. The 8-8 dream team year, I guess in 2011, right? When the Phillies were still in the playoffs before they started to decline. But yeah, man, it feels, I mean, football and baseball have kind of, moved a little further apart, I guess, in the last 10 years or whatever. But man, Philly's a baseball town. The Northeast is a baseball area. New York, Boston. I'm actually running. Yeah. I have another thing with the company now where I'm kind of in charge of our New York website too, and the stuff that's working up there's the Yankees, Mets. Man, I mean, like that baseball Northeast quarter baseball towns, man. I mean, it's always people talk about it being hyper local or whatever, and maybe that's true, but man, when the Phils are good, people are buying in and they're dialed in.
Sure. I mean, Baltimore has played well as of late, the Baltimore Orioles, but like, I know that town's been terrible with baseball for the last 10 years for the most part, more than that, far beyond that actually. Yeah. But if you give them a product, that is a baseball city. They will love and support the Orioles again. But as far as this baseball team goes, of course, it's alumni weekend. They put up a great showing and all this. I got to ask you about Pete Rose, and I'll put all the cards out on the table. My feeling, and I said earlier in the show, my feeling on this is, yes, the all-time hit king should be in the Hall of Fame. You're absolutely right. The guy with the most hits ever should be in the Hall of Fame. It's a shame that guy happens to be Pete Rose, who doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame because he's a total creep, shouldn't have been applauded, and just was all skeezy as hell on the TV broadcast of the game. Like, I just don't. I get the infatuation from a hustler standpoint, from a champion and winner, all that. But, like, I don't want to do favors for this guy anymore. And I don't think it was good to do something good for him this time around, just like it wouldn't have been good 5 years ago. Do something good for him. What do you think?
I think I agree with you mostly on a lot of that stuff. There's just so many ways to approach it and so many different little caveats to the story. Like, number one, I am a disciple in the church of more than one thing can be true. You know, perfectly true that he absolutely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as a baseball player. Like, I've never heard one person ever question his on-field credentials for being in the Hall of Fame. You know, at the same time, he's like a slime ball. You know, just like I felt very, like, I don't know, just not at ease watching that television broadcast where he was sitting in there. Like, the funny thing is, Mark, it's like you take him out. If you take all of the off-field transgressions and just put it off to the side, right? Just pretend that doesn't exist for example. Sure. Just talking to him about the shift and talking to him about baseball and just straight baseball topics. I still felt like I was like dirty after listening. I don't know, man. He's just got this vibe to him where he just seems like I don't know, kind of like a creepy old man or whatever. And I think you go beyond that and you're like, I get the part of it where it's like he was part of that team. You know, he's a big part of that team. And, like, you know, maybe if you can separate a little bit of that just for one day only, and at least people give him credit for, maybe you're one of those people who can give him credit for what he did on the field while still thinking he's an a-hole off the field, you know, and maybe those ideas are not mutually exclusive. You know, I don't know. People have to answer that for themselves. But in hindsight, man, they probably just should not have made him available to the media. Right. Or not put him on TV, or just like do take, like, you know, mitigating steps to prevent that from turning into a sideshow, because regardless of does it matter or not, or are those topics important or not, the off-field stuff that he did is important. But, you know, regardless of whether it takes some of the shine off of him coming back, like, what about the other dudes who were there for alumni weekend? Should have been talking about them, focusing on the, you know, feel good vibes at the ballpark. And then most of the headlines you got out of it were, you know, Pete Rose versus Alex Coffey and all these sidebar stories that came out of it, where ultimately that's not the takeaway that anybody was really looking for from this weekend. You know what I mean?
Sure. No, I think that's a great point. Like, I think more people would have been okay with the idea of Pete Rose walking on the field, tipping his cap, and then maybe even a Instagram post where the team films him saying how much he loves being back in Philly. Thanks, Phillies fan. And that's it. But, like, the idea of media session and putting him in the booth, probably not the best way to go about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, he could have just said, look, you know, I loved my time playing here. Appreciate the fans for coming out. Appreciated your support back then. You know, love these teammates, and it's good to be with them again. And hey, you know, that's it. That's all he really had to say, you know? And, like, he's gotten, like, multiple chances to try to show that he's, like, this, like, evolved as a human being and just, like, a little bit more of a decent dude. Like, you and I are not, like, prudes sitting up here who are like, oh my God, he said the S word on, like, the air. It's the worst thing. Like, that's not what we are. But it's like, man, just try to show for once you've changed a little bit, you've learned a little bit, and you're, like, a little bit of a decent human being. Like, you're 81 years old. It's 2022. Like, you can't call a female reporter babe anymore. Like, it's just some stuff just doesn't fly anymore. You know, it's like, you know, I think it was funny because people were getting, like, talking about, like, oh, it's a woke question, and, you know, this person has an agenda and all this stuff. The reason it was relevant, Mark, is because he was supposed to come back in 2017. And the whole reason he didn't is because of that specific incident with the 14-year-old girl. Right. So whether or not you agree with the way that the question was framed to him about that, the topic itself was relevant because that's why he was not here 5 years ago. So I didn't really understand people saying, like, oh, this reporter has an agenda or trying to make herself the story or whatever. I didn't think that had anything to do with it. I thought it was relevant based on the fact that, hey, we were supposed to do this 5 years ago, but we didn't because of the very topic that we're talking about right now. So I think if we've learned anything from this whole thing, it's just don't let Pete near microphone or don't put him on TV, which is like, hey, we had a great time and back in the day and he was an important part of that team. I appreciate the fans. I appreciate my teammates and like, yank him off the, give him the, like the, what's the stereotype where somebody's on stage and they send the big hook out?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the old whatever, the shepherd's hook, whatever it is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the cane. Get the cane. Just hook him off the stage. That whole thing.
Yeah, I know.
But I will say this past weekend solidified exactly why I was done with Pete Rose completely 5 years ago when that story came out. Yeah. It's because like he won't change. Like he didn't change. Like gambling, he didn't change until he was going to sell a book. All right, fine, he got me. I bet on it. Like all right. Yeah. So whatever. Like we can go on and on.
Many years later. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Many years later.
It's real funny. I don't mean to interrupt you quick. I
just go please.
Just point in before I forget it. Sure. A lot of people, like I was reading like responses to the different stories that people were writing about Pete Rose. I know you're never supposed to read the comments in the first place, but there's a lot of stuff like, well, yeah, you guys are like millennials or you're young or you weren't even alive to watch Pete Rose play. And I'm sitting here thinking like, well, okay. I mean, that's true, but I also didn't need to watch him play to just look at all of his stats and see that he was a 17-time All-Star and that he does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. And you've got YouTube highlights and all this stuff, but more than anything, it's like I read Anthony Sanfilippo write a story, an anti-Pete Rose story. I read Kevin Cooney saying that. Bob Ford wrote about it 5 years ago before he left the Inquirer. Okay. Those guys aren't millennials. They're not young. They're like in their 50s and their 60s. And these guys watched him play. They're more qualified to talk about it and write about it than anybody. And their opinions were reflective of your opinion and my opinion. Mm-hmm. So it's not a generational thing. It's not some like toxic masculinity, millennials and like, oh, it's different these days or whatever. Like there's a lot of like baseball writers in their 50s, in their 60s, pushing 70 who have the same feelings on Pete Rose that everybody else did. So I just found that to be kind of fascinating, to try to draw this like generational line of demarcation where it's like you guys don't appreciate what he did or aren't qualified to talk about what he did. I mean, it ain't just us, like there's other people like revered, baseball writers and journalists who share the same opinion that we do. So I find that to be kind of like a nothing burger, that accusation,
Oh, from Pete. Oh, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And Pete said the same. Well, Pete Rose said the same thing himself. And my feeling, because you've been young and you've come up in the business with people that are significantly older than you. My thought was when people are talking about age, they're just changing the subject. They don't want to answer your question because your question will then become valid. Instead, I'll just play the "I'm older than you and know more than you" card. Yeah, which sometimes is right. In this case, it's not at all. No, let me ask you. Let me ask you this here. So the Phillies are playing like really good baseball and stuff, which is pretty awesome, as we talked about earlier. Gene Segura just came back in the lineup. Nick Maton, forgot he existed for a minute. He comes out, hits a bomb. Yeah. Then Rhys Hoskins gets hot. Hopefully everything checks out fine with his other forearm, wrist, whatever. And then Bryce Harper will be coming back September-ish. Mm-hmm. Right now, if you have to say, granted, it's the Nationals. They have 4-game sweep over the Nationals. They got another, I love your term, nothing burger. They got 3 games coming up against the Marlins. Hopefully they keep the same thing going before they face the Mets. How high do you think? Like, what's the expectation now? How has it changed, do you think? Let's say maybe the second week of September with Bryce Harper back in this lineup. How much better will this Phillies team be?
Well, I much better. And I think that's why people were I thought some of the like responses to the trade deadline were a little like off base because people were saying, oh, it didn't really make a big splash. Okay. Well, first of all, nobody really expected them to make a big splash. Were they really going to be in the market for like one of the top 3 starting pitchers who are out there? No, they don't really have the ammunition for that anyway. But like, you knew you were getting Bryce back. You knew you were getting Segura back. The guys that they added, Syndergaard, Robertson, etc., they'll contribute now. Okay. So they got rid of, you don't have to make a blockbuster move to improve your team. Like they got rid of guys who were not contributing for guys who will contribute, so it's basically just they had a straight swap, move some prospects, and the Phillies made themselves a better team last Wednesday than they were last Tuesday, and then you look at the Segura and the Harper thing as like the cherry on top, obviously like the team's only going to get better, the expectation to me, I'm not like a middle of the season goalpost mover kind of guy. It's like I look at it as what it is at the beginning of the year. Anybody would be happy for this team to make the playoffs after 10 years of not being there. So I'm going to be more than happy with them just getting there, right? It's not like when the Eagles started 3-0 in Doug's first year, and it's like, oh, Super Bowl. It's like, no, it's like, okay, I still think they're probably like a 500-ish team here, but I wouldn't talk people out of being excited for him now, for sure. But I mean, I just don't want people to go overboard at the same time.
No, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Switch gears real quick. I want to talk about the Sixers. Did it give you warm and fuzzies when you saw Kevin Durant champagne showering James Harden? How did it make you feel personally?
I was funny too, because KD's got the Philly connection now because he's a co-owner of the union. So it's
that's right.
If you're not going to come down and play for the Sixers, at least like recruit a guy to come down here or something. I don't know. Help us. Come where you're kind of like adopted like town now. So help us out
right.
at some point. But yeah, man, it's just funny like seeing all that behind the scenes and like, the investigation stuff is just man, I mean, I don't even know where you start with that. What's funny, man, is like if you look at the way that James Harden played last year, I mean, you can make the argument that $32 million is market value for what he
absolutely
so
totally
like,
but if you still got another 15 million just sitting there and you're like, nah, I'm still gonna applaud you for saying no to 15 million when you could have just had that in your back pocket no matter what.
Yeah, and I don't my thing with the NBA is like if you're gonna do this with the Sixers, okay, they did it with the Knicks, right? Okay, do the Brunson investigation, that's fine. If you're going to investigate one team, you got to invest everybody, right? Because everybody does it, right? I mean, it's no secret here. I mean, I don't know what the solution. Maybe that suggests to me, Mark. It's like if you have so many problems with every team having to be investigated for this pre-contact or whatever it is, then maybe the rule needs to change. Or maybe you do some kind of like maybe what does the NFL have, like the legal tampering period,
right?
Maybe you just adjust it so that it's not so much where you're trying to just change the course of everything, right? This is not like, what's the name of the guy? Was it Joe Johnson who signed for like $1 million a year for the Timberwolves or whatever? And that's they got docked like 4 first-round picks, and it kind of like
I think you're right.
Yeah, it's kind of screwed up Kevin Garnett's whole like Timberwolves experience because they couldn't build a team around him. Yeah, but this is much different than a guy taking like 3 $1 million deals in a row,
right?
Versus like Harden with an option on the back end of it and giving yourself some wiggle room. Like I don't know if you can. If you get hit with a tampering thing and you lose like a 2nd round pick or something, so be it. If they find some like fugazi like circumvention of the salary cap thing here, then we're really going to have something to talk about. But I can't imagine the NBA goes there because it's like, again, like I said, you go there with one team, you got to go there with everybody.
Right. Absolutely. Now the Eagles, at the time we taped this, just wrapped up a outdoor practice at Lincoln Financial Field. The crowd got to see them for the first time, the new version of Jalen Hurts, we hope. What are you taking out of all the reports in training camp with Jalen Hurts and how he has been playing so far to this point?
Jack shit.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry. Can I say that? I sound like Pete Rose now.
I was just gonna, beat me to the line. Yeah, yes, absolutely. Pete, easy, but no. Okay, cool. So you and I are pretty much in the same boat there. Excellent.
But I would say this, man. It's funny because I think they're so. I'm not going to begrudge anybody for sharing that stuff or highlighting that stuff. I mean, there's obviously a demand for that. It's like the Eagles news or information is in demand 24/7. And
sure.
If there's demand, then there's got to be supply to meet it. Maybe the supply, maybe on some days the supply is really worthwhile, meaningful stuff, and maybe on other days it's not. But if that's what fans are looking for, and there's a portion of fans who want to follow along with the play-by-play tweets and statistics and stuff like that, then who am I to say that that's the wrong thing? I don't want anybody to like lose. This is probably fighting a losing battle here, but I would like Eagles fans to at least remain somewhat pragmatic about like the prospects of the season. I think it's funny, man. I look at it. I like to look at things more like from a macro perspective, and I think like to me, I'm more interested in the topic of not whether Jalen Hurts can be a passer or if he's strictly a runner, but if they have to go back to like the run first simplified offense, do Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen believe that you can win by doing that?
Right.
No, I mean, like, do you think that, and we know, right, that they like passing the ball, and the modern day NFL, is leaning towards that much more than running the ball. But if you came to a conclusion where it's like Jalen Hurts is just going to be a running guy, he's never going to be that great of a throwing guy, can he be some kind of like a Lamar Jackson, and can that get you deep into the playoffs?
Right.
To me, it's like a larger philosophical question of, if it's not about what you want to do, but can you make this work if it's not plan A, so that's what I think.
Yeah.
No,
Curious, my feeling on it is we'll know within the first really 3 weeks of the season, because I think it'll be enough of a sample size to let us know what the Eagles at least wanted to do in the second year of Jalen Hurts being the regular starter and a second season under Nick Sirianni's system and all that. And it'll show you how much better Jalen Hurts got. And if they're doing that same run first mentality like they were in the majority of the second half of last year and a little bit more of the season than that, then we'll know that they don't have that much confidence in Jalen Hurts to be not just the guy as in a franchise quarterback, but to be the guy that makes the offense go.
No, I know. And it's funny to me, like if you hypothetically say like you have a season like you did last year where they come out and they're like so or whatever, and then they kind of switch it up and they start to run the ball a little bit more and they get back to Jalen Hurts doing what Jalen does well, and they have another 9-8 or like a 10-7 off of that. Even then, do they pull the plug on Hurts at the end of it because he's not the type of quarterback that they want? Even if he has like a decent year, even if he has another year similar to what he has, to me, I think the bigger question that people don't talk about that often is more of like is this stylistically what the Eagles want to do and what they value? Right. Like, is this the kind of football team they want to have? So that's what I'm curious to see, and maybe AJ Brown solves a lot of those questions. We for us, man, these are like hypothetical, they're rhetorical questions, right? For Howie and for Nick and for Shane Steichen, they're real questions that they got to answer, not just what works, but like, is this what we want to be? So that's kind of like the thing that I'm focused on more than anything.
I'm right there with you. Kevin Kinkead, Crossing Broad, you guys do a phenomenal job. Always enjoy following all the story, all the wide variety of stories that you guys cover over there, of course. Appreciate you coming on, brother. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Farzy Show, my friend.
It's always a pleasure, man. Thanks. We'll do it again sometime, right?
Absolutely. Kevin Kinkead joining us.